Now, one thing I always see on my socials is people looking for what are the best games to play visually on the MetaQuest, and I believe the games I'm going to show you today are the very best games that MetaQuest has to offer. And if you're looking for reviews or gameplay of any of these games featured today, you will find them on this channel. So please hit the like button and let's get into it. Red Matter 2 is no slouch on any VR system, but the developer's Vertical Robot went to town on pushing the very best visuals for the MetaQuest 3 version with increased render resolution, 4K textures, dynamic shadows, and high quality shadow filtering. And not only does it look fantastic, it's actually a very cool game too, and is a superb example of what can be achieved on standalone hardware with the right developers at the controls. Even on Quest 2, this game was an incredible graphical achievement, but the Quest 3 enhancements took it to the next level and was one of the first games that really gave us a parity between Quest 3, PSVR 2, and PCVR. You will also find an affiliate code for every game listed today if there's one available, and that will save you 10% on every game you purchase. Now, for everyone who's played it, it's obvious I was going to include Batman Arkham Shadow to this list. This is potentially the flagship title right now for Quest 3 and Quest 3S, and it can easily rub shoulders with many PCVR and PSVR 2 games in terms of overall quality. The moment you step foot in Gotham, you can see how much effort has really been put into this. The performance of Batman is also absolutely solid throughout, regardless of how many enemies you have to fight in the headset. You have a huge sprawling city to explore like every other Batman Arkham game, and when you're in Blackgate Prison, Batman Arkham Shadow does a great job of keeping you in a maze full of discovery and distractions. And because of this, you don't question continuously going from gate to gate, which is where the magical level loading occurs. And you won't even notice this going on, which means you won't get corridor fatigue. And overall, it's a very clever game from a design standpoint. Assassin's Creed Nexus is an absolutely stunning game overall, but it definitely still has some frame drops in larger environments. And unfortunately, it never got any updates after it was launched to fix some of these issues. But these issues can be helped with the use of Quest Optimizer. But even with those occasional stutters, I think it's a pretty incredible game to witness inside the Quest headset. And it's still one of the best Assassin's Creed games I've ever played personally. Becoming Ezio for the first time and seeing your blades spring from your wrists is completely unforgettable, and the parkour works extremely well. It's a high quality game and again shows MetaQuest can do some very impressive graphics. Metro Awakening, which I believe is a must play for fans of the flat screen series, has a very compelling story and a decent gameplay length of around 8 hours. The atmosphere is very immersive and the weapons look great, and it's full of tense moments and small details like wiping moisture from your mask using your hands. That is something I always wanted to do and experience when I played the flat version. Vertigo somehow managed to achieve an incredible port to all VR platforms, but knowing that Metro Awakening is running on a MetaQuest, I still think some praise needs to be given for how good this port really is. And it also gives me high hopes for their next game, Thief VR. Instant Radius 2 is currently in early access on MetaQuest, but this hasn't stopped the developers really focusing on trying to bring the PC version to the Quest. And the first time I actually stepped into the Quest 3 version, I was pretty much blown away by what they have achieved. Currently, the only downside is the armory, which does suffer from some frame drops last time I checked it out, but outside of that, it's a brilliant port that delivers all the atmosphere of the PC version, and even though it's still in early days, it has some great potential. There is only one other game on this list for me that has succeeded in making a truly perfect port to Quest from PC, and I'll get to that a little bit later in the video. The original Walking Dead Saints and Sinners got some excellent Quest 3 updates, bringing it closer to parity with all the other platforms, and is still one of the best zombie survival games we have in VR. The Quest 3 version now has better lighting, a higher resolution, a more solid frame rate, and more importantly, more zombies on the screen. And while we're talking about Skydance games, we have to include their latest release, Behemoth. Skydance's Behemoth takes a stab at bringing a Shadow of the Colossus to VR, with some very physical combat along with some epic Behemoth fights. It's not the perfect game, and it did have some launch issues, but there's seriously nothing else like it in VR. The grapple mechanics are excellent, and when it comes to graphics, I was absolutely impressed with the Quest 3 version, especially when you actually get into those Behemoth encounters. It really does hold its own against the PC versions and PSVR 2. Now, Ghost Town and MetaQuest 3 absolutely floored me many times, and is now easily one of the best looking games on Quest 3, and it stands as a fantastic example of what is actually achievable on the headset. It's a beautiful game that never lets up right until the end credits, and it actually felt like a breath of fresh air compared to a lot of Quest games that need some sort of patch or release half half-baked, but this is absolutely perfect in terms of performance and quality. And if you haven't already, check out my review, because I really do believe everyone should add this game to their games library. Blade and Sorcery Nomad is potentially the best PC VR to Quest port we've ever had. Obviously, Blade and Sorcery has been available on Quest for many years, going through many different iterations. But after playing the Crystal Hunt earlier in the year on PC VR, I was absolutely shocked by the Quest version, and there's nothing missing in terms of content. Blade and Sorcery remains up there as one of the must-have VR games for every Quest owner, and it constantly improves year on year. And overall, it's just a fantastic game to experience and is very immersive. Hard Bullet, which only released a little while ago, is a shockingly great port from the PC too, especially with the inclusion of the live content capture tools that give players the ability to film some absolutely epic and horrifying clips of them laying waste to tons of NPCs in some very inventive ways. But we're here to talk about graphics, and on this front, Hard Bullet for me is right up there as one of the most impressive PC to Quest games we've got on the system. Asgard's Wrath 2 wasn't quite the hit that Meta hoped it would be, but for those who invested time into it, they found a game that not only looks absolutely fantastic, it has so much gameplay you could easily put 50 hours into this and still not be anywhere near hitting the credits. With a map that is apparently bigger than Skyrim, it has tons of NPCs, boss fights, quests, and a never-ending amount of very cleverly made puzzles, and it's even got its own roguelite built in. If anything, the downside of this game is actually the size of it, with only 5% of players ever actually completing it, but it's still a technically absolutely insane game for a standalone VR device. Alien Rogue Incursion launched in an okay state, but soon got some improvements for the Quest which was sorely needed, like better shadows, better contrast in the first half of the game, which was very lacking at launch, and thankfully it now has a better frame rate. If there's one thing Survios definitely nailed with Alien Rogue Incursion, it's capturing the feeling and atmosphere of playing an Aliens game in VR. Everything in the environment has that square, clunky look from the 80s. Computers make all the old sounds, similar to a Spectrum you would expect. And the place is littered with flashing buttons and lights that do absolutely nothing but look cool. There's now thick smoke from the pipes, snow when you're outside, and some brilliant lighting effects that almost look straight out of a Michael Bay movie, leaving me overall impressed with the visuals, and I think it's a great game on all systems. Contractor Showdown and Exfill Zone is a very good example of another great PC VR to Quest port. I would happily play this on either platform, but I personally use PC more so just for the recording purposes, because capturing content on Quest is still pretty poor in comparison to what you actually see in the headset. But this is a game I also recommend you use Quest Optimizer with. You can increase the resolution and then increase the frame rate from the base 72 frames a second to 90 or even 120, which is an absolute game changer to see inside the headset. And the original Contractors has some excellent mods and levels for Call of Duty Zombies, Halo and Star Wars, which I think are actually better than the levels in the original base game, and they all deserve to be on this list because they all look absolutely fantastic. Into Black is a highly underrated game and was the biggest surprise hit for me back in 2024. It's got so many elements of games I like, including Deep Rock Galactic with a sprinkle of No Man's Sky, and it looks absolutely brilliant on Quest 3 with a super smooth frame rate, extremely bold colours and some crazy environments. The voice work is excellent and features the same voice actor who played Codsworth from the Fallout series, and overall this game is nothing short of excellent. Now personally, I think Resident Evil 4 is still probably one of the best built from the ground up standalone VR ports from a flat screen game we've ever had. I know some people may have an issue with this since it's now over 3 years old, but I still think it looks great on Quest 3, especially again if you start using Quest Optimizer to bump everything up. As someone who loves the original Resident Evil 4, this port is the very best way to play the original version of Resident Evil 4. Armature Studios did a great job of making it extremely comfortable to be played seated or standing, and the Mercenaries mode was one of my favourite VR addictions for quite some time. And before I wrap up this video, in terms of realistic visuals, I wanted to give Real VR Fishing a quick mention too, and this is mainly for the backgrounds. I'm not saying everything else looks bad, because everything from the sea life to the fishing rods look fine, but the environments are captured with real 3D geometry, and then the devs added lots of little touches in VR to make these levels actually look quite alive, with rolling clouds, mist, and even animals like bears, birds, and overall it's a technically very impressive game to see in the headset. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you ever so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and let others know your best looking games on Quest down in the comment section, and I'll see you all on the next one.